We might go ahead and get started with apologies for the late start, but blame it on the trains. We're so pleased that all of you could be here tonight. This is a really wonderful occasion, and I am just so proud and grateful, or my feelings for the evening, and proud and grateful first to the Women's Leadership Network for organizing this program. And I'm just, when I arrived at Brooklyn Law School a little over a year ago now and got to know the Women's Leadership Network, it is the most impressive organization and something that is really quite unusual in law schools, to my knowledge, and really a tribute to the initiative of alumni here at Brooklyn Law School who took the initiative to organize this effort to celebrate and support women from Brooklyn Law School who are showing enormous leadership and impact in a vast array of areas, from law practice, of course, to serving on the bench, to in business and corporations and education and everything else. So appreciative of the support that they provide, not only to other women in our alumni network, but also, of course, to students and to supporting students through scholarship support, as well as through mentorship and hiring and encouragement and example. So that's my first reason, but the second reason for my pride and appreciation tonight is that we are showcasing public service and judging, which is itself part of the lifeblood of Brooklyn Law School. Serving the public and the public interest is an extraordinarily important part of our identity and goes back to the very beginning. And that includes, of course, women who have gone back to the very beginning of Brooklyn Law School leading in this realm. And I just wanted to highlight two examples of women from our very beginning who have blazed trails and left a mark in public service and judging. And going back, we of course started in 1901, as surely everyone in this room knows. But from as early as the class of 1906 included Rosalie Gardner Jones, who, known as General Jones, was one of this country's most important and influential leaders of the women's suffrage movement. And among other activities, led two marches from New York City, one in 1912 to Albany, marching all the way, hundreds of women, and another in February of 1913, which is not the best month to be marching, from New York to Washington, D.C., and really extraordinary leadership. She went on to run for Congress later, another dimension of public service, later in her career. Also in the class of 1908, Jeanette Brill, born on the Lower East Side, grew up and then came to Brooklyn Law School at night while teaching school during the day. She, in 1923, she was appointed by the Attorney General of the state of New York, Deputy Attorney General, to investigate and prosecute labor abuses and labor conditions, and then went on to become the first woman magistrate judge in Brooklyn, only the second in New York City, and then went on ultimately serving on the Court of Special Appeals and the Court of Domestic Relations, where she pioneered early juvenile and adolescent justice innovations. Also founded the Brooklyn Women's Bar Association. So just extraordinary women who have come through the school from our very beginning, and then, of course, represented by tonight's panel as well. So, so appreciative to all of you for being here, and of course to our distinguished panelists for participating. So with that, I will turn it over, I think, Mika, to the leader. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you all for being here. I'm super excited about this program. Can't believe I'm next to all of these esteemed people. Actually, when we were doing our prep sessions, I realized I've never been on a virtual video call with judges in my entire life. So I really feel privileged to be here. I am Chair Mika Bondi, Chair of the Women's Leadership Circle, and we are the Executive Council of the Women's Leadership Network, and we stand for 3 Ps. One is great programming, and this is a case in point. We try to put on inspiring, educational, and career-enhancing programming for our audience and for our community. The second is people. We are really focused on community, networking, mentoring, and really driving up all of the achievements and love of law of all of our students and our alumni. And then finally, the final P, which is not a P, it's philanthropy, which is phonetically a little different, but we also endowed a scholarship for our students. And we're going into our 5th, 6th year, and we have incredible students that have received scholarships from the Women's Leadership Circle and Network. And so I'm super proud of what we've accomplished. The Women's Leadership Circle and Network have been around for about 6 years. I've been president since January. I have 2 more years to go, but we're really encouraging people to join. We changed some of our financial commitments to make it a little bit more enduring for both for the scholarship and for the school. So if you'd like to join, please feel free to reach out to me, to Camille James, to Katie Camuso, who's here, and you can find out more details about what the financial commitment is. But I think it's a great opportunity to work with great women across our school and across our community, and just to learn more about all the different paths of being a lawyer. I think one of the greatest things that when I was at Brooklyn Law School, one of the professors said, you're going to grow up and you're going to be paid to think for a living, and I think that's such a privilege that we all get paid to think and to provide service for clients and for our community. So I'm super excited to introduce our moderator, who will introduce the panelists and start the program. So Professor Dana Brackman-Reeser is here, and she's a professor at Brooklyn Law School, and she's going to start up the panel. Thank you so much.
Great. So I'm just going to speak from here because our goal tonight is to really have a conversation amongst the panelists and a conversation with all of you. And so I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, and I'll ask them some questions, but each of them has been very clear that they don't just want to answer questions from me, so we won't hold questions till the end. If there are questions that are raising your interest as we go along, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll try to get to some of those as well, keeping in mind we could talk about this subject all night, so part of my job is to make sure you get to the very important second P, where everyone will be able to network and ask more conversations in smaller venues. So just to give you a quick intro to our panel, we have, starting all the way to my right, we have the Honorable Rachel Fryer, who is a Supreme Court Justice. All of these folks are Brooklyn Law School alums at the Kings County Supreme Court civil term. And next to her, we have Assemblymember Rodneyse Bichotte Hermelyn. And she has many roles as an assembly member and majority whip, as well as chair of the Brooklyn Democratic Party and assembly district in the assembly district here, right where we sit. We've also got to my right the Honorable Ramon Reyes Jr., who I just learned on Thursday will be celebrating his first anniversary as a U.S. District Judge here in the Eastern District of New York, but that is capping off a nearly 2-decade-long career in judicial and public service. So we're very excited to hear from Judge Reyes as well. And to complete our panel, we have the Honorable Ann Swern, who is on the King's Supreme Court civil term, former Democratic District Leader, New York State in the 52nd Assembly District. Now, each of these panelists has an incredible list of accomplishments, and the organizers and I decided, rather than spending all of our time walking through them, as impressive as they are, we wanted to get to them talking instead of me talking. But the organizers have provided bios, printed bios at the back of the room, and do feel free to peruse their many accomplishments. It might help you to think about questions that you might want to ask each of them. So we are going to start with about 10 minutes where each will briefly share with us their journey to a career in public service and or the judiciary, kind of what inspired you and what was a very brief sense of your path along the way. Then next, we will move to talking about navigating the appointment and election processes. So if you have specific questions about that, you might want to think about it during that part of the panel. We'll also talk about the process of building a career in public service and judging, as well as about mentoring and networking. And then we'll close things up and move to the more informal part of our panel. So I will start where I started my introductions with Judge Fryer. Can you tell us a little bit about what first inspired you and your path to becoming a judge?
Okay, I'll try to be very, very brief because I could really talk like for hours about that. But just to let everybody, I'm not sure how many of you know my background, but I belong to the Hasidic community, and I was raised in a very ultra-Orthodox Hasidic home. And college was not really something that was available back then when I was a kid growing up. And I was a good kid, never wanted to be a rebel, and I became a legal secretary because I just have this innate passion for law and justice. And I thought I would be happy my whole life being a legal secretary. And then when I turned 30, I realized I was working for lawyers that were younger than me, and that it was time for me to go to college and get a degree and see what would become of me. I didn't know if I would be successful in any endeavor in the law, and my path was full of naysayers, but I just decided I was going to try. And that really was how I just went from being a legal secretary, and then I became a lawyer. And then once I became a lawyer, I wanted to go to the next step. And the next step would be becoming a judge. And my uncle of blessed memory, Judge David Schmidt, he was my mentor. And I remember telling him one day, I want to be a judge like you. And then when he retired, he called me up and said, if you still want to be a judge like me, you got to run. And that was another whole part of my life. I had no idea what it was all about. And that was a long journey. And that's basically my story in a nutshell. And then in terms of what inspired me to become a judge, it was, I think, at one point when I was running a youth at risk program, and I was advocating for kids at risk in the Hasidic community, primarily adolescent boys. And one of the kids that I was mentoring had a case in family court, a broken home and a very sad case. And I appeared in family court to help this kid. And I remember looking at the judge on J Street and thinking to myself, that judge has such an important role in this kid's life. And I said to myself, I can't just advocate for kids, I have to become a judge one day. And just story after story after story, but it was with incredible divine providence that I was able to get to where I am despite all the naysayers. So with that, I pass my baton to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Assemblymember Rodneyse Bichotte Hermelyn. I'm so happy to be here. I'm a recent grad. What inspired me to be in public service? Well, I would say it really started a long time ago, and I didn't know it started a long time ago when I was 12 years old. I participated in a lot of community service like March of Dimes, marching for issues around birth defects, and for a very long time that was my thing. And then in college I joined Habitat for Humanity, working for families who are of low income, giving them a hand up to start wealth and a life, a quality of life. But it was really when I was in Chicago. So first, I was born in the United States. I was born in Brooklyn. by 2 Haitian immigrants who came to the United States to, again, catch the American dream. And I had the opportunity to kind of elevate and go away to college, and had the opportunity to leave New York and work in Chicago. And there was a man who really inspired me. I had joined the Democratic Party. It was the very first time I actually voted, and I joined this man because I thought he was very inspirational, joined his campaign, and he happened to become U.S. Senator of Illinois and then become the President of the United States. He was inspiring. Yes, I was an Obama operative. And that was my first look, my first experience into politics. I then went back to New York, worked on Wall Street, and there was still that bug that was, there was something in me, that was not fulfilled. And I decided to help my local senator. His name is Kevin Parker. He said, hey, I need help. This is a rough race. I need help. I said, okay, whatever you need. I took off my suit. I put on a shirt. And I found myself speaking for the very first time in a long time Haitian Creole to people in my community. I was saying, I'll vote, I'll vote, I'll vote. And that meant go and vote. And I'm like, wow, what a difference that is when people have access, language, access, and just resources, and they can exercise their right to vote. And right there and then, that whole moment inspired me. And when I stood there, I thought about my whole life experience, how I almost got lost. I was in special ed for 6 years. And I almost got lost because of not having access to resources and language access. My mother and my father didn't know how to speak English. And it took an accident to have me bedridden for 6 months, where I got a home instructor who came in and said, I'm gonna do one-on-one. And finally, I was at par. And then within the next 2 years, I graduated 3rd in my class in junior high school. And then I went into engineering and mathematics and just started discovering about myself. And when I stood there, again, saying, I'll vote, I thought about the many different opportunities that can be available to everybody if they just had access. So I decided to leave Wall Street and be poor and ran for a position called district leader, and won, and then lost assembly, but stayed in the district leader and then became an assembly member. And then, that kind of elevated me, been in that position for quite some time. But it was within the district leader that I was also introduced to the judiciary process, which is why I have many friends here. And that, again, exposed me to another thing that I found I had passion, which is why I decided to go to law school and had the opportunity to help elevate and appoint and nominate judges, because I felt that legislation sometimes is not enough. We need to find other avenues to advocate for ourselves, and another way is court. And so I'm gonna stop here, but that's one of the reasons why I was inspired to be in public service.
Thank you.
My inspiration for having a career in public service and to become a judge came from one person, largely. And that's David Traeger, former dean of Brooklyn Law School, district judge in the Eastern District, for whom I clerked a couple years out of law school, out of Brooklyn. Watching him do his job with such passion and commitment, dedication to the parties, and I just saw that he got such enjoyment out of it and such satisfaction that I wanted to do what he was doing. In fact, we had about midway through the clerkship, he asked to have lunch with me in his chambers after I went and got him a pumpernickel bagel with whitefish spread, and came back, and that was his thing. We talked. He said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" That's exactly what he said. It's like, "I want to do what you're doing." And so he chuckled a little bit, and then we talked about sort of how to get from where I was as a law clerk to becoming a judge. And he suggested many things to do, and a suggested career path that would put me in a position where I would be at least a decent candidate for becoming a judge. It included not working at a law firm for a couple of years, but then going to the U.S. Attorney's Office and being an assistant U.S. attorney, which I did, and then trying to become a magistrate judge, which I did at a suggestion. And there were a whole host of other things that he suggested, bar associations to join, and how to get involved in the legal community beyond the job. And so he was instrumental and provided sort of that impetus in me deciding on a career in public service and becoming a judge.
I'm going to go in an opposite direction here because I keep thinking what inspired me, and it actually wasn't a single thing or something I thought about in advance. And I'm going back to what the dean said in his opening remarks. We heard about 2 women that were involved in law school in the early 1900s. But lest you think that there were women involved in this career, there were not. In 1977, I came to this school. And it was one of the first times there was a group of women, actually, in the classes, as opposed to a smattering here and there. And the reason I went to law school was because I didn't feel I had enough education. I didn't want to just be a certain kind of job. I knew I wanted to work, but I didn't want to be a job where it didn't require some advanced education. And I thought law school would be a great advanced education that you could do a lot of things with law. And I still say this, I mentor a number of people, and I'm an adjunct professor here, and I teach students, and I always say to them, you don't have to know what you want to do, learn what you don't want to do. Learn what you don't, and that's really how I came to public service. I knew I wanted to do something that was enjoyable and fulfilling and meaningful. I knew that. But did I know what public service was? There were no lawyers in my family. I was the first person to graduate from college. What did I know from public service? And so I came here. I got a great education. I was telling the dean, really, I'm so grateful for the education. I'm going to flip around, but I had Dean Prince. I am so good at evidence, so good at evidence. I know that Richardson backwards and forwards. And this is 44 years ago we're talking about. So I'm really grateful because I had clinical programs that I did even then. And I learned, interestingly enough, I did a federal judicial clerkship with Judge Leonard Sand. It was his first year on the federal bench. And I learned that I didn't want to do that, that I didn't want to go to federal court, that I didn't want to do that. Then I worked in a firm. I didn't want to do that. I clerked for a bankruptcy judge the year they changed the bankruptcy code. I could have had a great job doing that the year they changed the code. I didn't want to do that. And then this is what happened. It was an event, I guess. It was the year before we graduated, and I had good grades here. So people were saying, you could do this, you could do that. And I went to arraignments, criminal arraignments, and it was the summertime, and there was no air conditioning, and people had their jackets off, and files were lined up here, and they were screaming and yelling, and things were flying all over the place. I said, this is the job for me. This is the job for me. And it was really seeing the passion, seeing the excitement, seeing the lack of boredom, that said to me, I want to go do that job. And luckily for me, I had good grades. I didn't know anything about being an assistant DA. They asked me about lineups. I didn't know. They said, well, what about this? They asked me about all sorts of things in criminal. I didn't know. And this is networking. All this relates to it. So I had a friend at Brooklyn Law School 2 years ahead of me. I didn't know she went to the Brooklyn DA's office. She sees me walking out of my interview, and believe me, I didn't know. anything. But as I said, I had good grades. And she said, you want this job? And I said, yeah, I do. She goes, I'm going to talk to somebody. And she must have gone back and said, whether she knows it or not, she'd be great at this job. I got the job like the beginning of September. So I didn't even have to interview that whole last year. So I could enjoy myself in law school in the last year. And the things that I learned in law school and the things that I learned coming into this have held true to this day. I've done what the next right thing seemed like, or the next interesting thing seemed, and that's how I got here. I didn't think I want to be a judge. Rodneyse knows this a little bit. I didn't want to be a district leader. I was an assistant DA. I loved that job. I became the first assistant DA, which is a very high-level job in that office. And I had done all this problem-solving justice, drug court, mental health court, all of that I had done. And I had become very friendly with the defense bar, because you cannot do this without colleagues. You can't do this without stakeholders. So they knew me. I got hired as managing counsel of Brooklyn Defenders. Nobody goes in that career trajectory from first assistant DA to managing counsel. And then in the middle of all this, my community said to me, would you be the district leader? My assembly person, Joan Millman, and Joanne Simon, and the local people here, I'm in the 52nd Assembly District, which includes Brooklyn Law School, they said, please do this. I'm like, I'm 60 years old. I don't want an unpaid elected job. I said volunteer job. They said, it's not a volunteer job. You have to get elected to it. But it's unpaid and it's elected, right? I'm like, do I really need this? It's my 60 years old. And they said, no, we need you. So I said no at first. There was a woman, and this is a woman's story too. I'm going off topic, but on topic for women. And on topic, I'm in the women's leadership circle, by the way. And so what happened was there was a woman who took the job. And she had young children, and she had to spend a lot of money going to meetings and spend a lot of time away from her young children, couldn't do the job anymore. The community people came back to me and said, please just fill out her term. Please, she can't do it anymore. And because I am a person who cares about women and cares about people who have families, I have children, I care about other people's children, I said, all right, I'll finish the job out for 3 months, thinking I would do it 3 months. And just like Rodneyse, it was, selecting civil court judges. Most district leaders do not have a legal education, and yet they're very instrumental in selecting the judges or who should run for judge. And also because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed learning something new at 60 years old, which, as I said, it's not boring and it's fulfilling. And so I did it. And one thing led to another. Then the district attorney died, may he rest in peace, Ken Thompson. I was never going to run for DA. Then my husband and the head of Brooklyn Defenders like, you got to run, you got to run. You have to raise $1 million for that. I never raised $5 for myself. I ran for Brooklyn DA. I came in second out of a group of 7. I raised the second most amount of money of anybody. And then the Democratic Party came to me and said, would you like to run for civil court judge? And I'm like, I don't know. And they said, you would like that job. And one thing led to another, and I became a civil court judge, and then I became a Supreme Court judge. But it wasn't my intention. My intention was to continue to love the law and to do the next thing that came in front of me that seemed really fulfilling and seemed really interesting.
Well, these are all very inspirational stories, and I would love to ask some follow-ups, but I'm going to hold back my Socratic tendencies and make sure that we cover the specifics, because I know a lot of people here have come tonight because they're interested in potentially pursuing these kinds of careers for themselves. So, each of you have had lots of different careers in public service and the judiciary, and we're going to talk a little bit about just how that works, how you get to do those jobs, some of which you've alluded to already. So we can start with Judge Reyes and the federal appointment process. That may be something that people are a little bit familiar with at the very end of the process, but there's a whole lot that goes in before you get there, and so maybe you can enlighten us about how that all works.
Sure. I'll start with the magistrate judge selection process. You apply to a merit selection panel that is convened by the chief judge of the district. It's a very extensive application, and they vet it, they check your references, they interview the candidates, and they make a recommendation to the district judges of 5 candidates for every vacant position. The district judges then interview those 5 individuals and by majority vote select who they want for each position. It's a similar process for United States bankruptcy judges, except it's done at the circuit and district level. There are 2 circuit judges and 1 district judge that are the panel, and that make the recommendation for the selection to the larger group. For district judges, I can tell you what the process, what it still is, but it's might be changing in January 20th or whatever the inauguration is. But and it's similar in the different states. So it's basically a recommendation from a senator or both senators to the president for nomination, and then if you're nominated, you go through a very grueling process. To get the recommendation in New York, it was an application to Senator Schumer's screening panel and an interview in front of them, and then if you are recommended by the panel, an interview with Senator Schumer, and then the recommendation is made to the president. You are interviewed, if you get that far, you're interviewed by White House counsel, and they vet you, and then they advise the president on whether or not to nominate you. Once you're nominated, you fill out what's called fill out the FBI background check, where they go back to when you were 18 years old, every job, every supervisor, everything. And you also fill out a Senate Judiciary questionnaire, which is a long application, literally an application. I calculated it took me 250 hours to complete it. That's not an exaggeration. Once you do that, it then goes to it gets vetted by the Department of Justice and White House counsel's office. There's a grueling set of interviews, mocks for the Judiciary Committee hearing, where they uncover every wart, every issue, everything you've written. If there's anyone out there on social media that's considering doing this, get off of social media right now and scrub your accounts. They're very intrusive, and rightfully so. That process culminates in the hearing in front of the Judiciary Committee, and then 2 weeks after usually 2 weeks after your hearing, the committee votes, and if you make it out of committee at the right time, you go to the Senate floor and get voted on. And if you're lucky enough, you get your commission usually about a week after you're voted successfully on the floor. So that's the process.
Thank you.
I compared it, Dean Meyer may remember this, I compared it unfavorably to having a root canal.
That's great. So maybe we can move away from thinking about such painful experiences with the federal government and think about the challenges and opportunities on the state level, right? So it might be a good idea to start with you, Assembly Member Bichotte Hermelyn, because as you mentioned, you're involved in some of the initial stages, and maybe you could describe some of this process for nominations as well as the elective piece. But we also have our 2 other state judges here who can give us some insights on the election process.
Well, the election process to run for a position varies depending on what the position is. You heard Judge Swern, what she had to go through, and it was different processes for running for a DA versus running for a judge, and even running for a Supreme Court judge. I ran for the traditional political position. It was a state rep where you have to really connect with your community. You have to know the concerns for that particular community. I was raised in a community that was largely Caribbean, many different language. I also have a large Jewish community, as well as a growing Muslim community, and I would say everybody else. And you have to find a way of looking at the commonalities, right? You're gonna have different religions, you're gonna have different ways of lives and things of that nature, but you have to do some type of like target marketing and stuff like that when you're running for these traditional pieces. And I can say, you know, I went to Northwestern and I got my MBA there, and best marketing school, by the way, best marketing school. And one of the things is that I applied what I learned from the school to my election strategy, which was I literally targeted the different communities. You know, if it was the Haitian Creole communities, I had Haitian Creole mailers. If it was the Orthodox Jewish community, I went to a rabbi who supported me. If it was a Muslim community, I had a Muslim organization who supported me. So it was just different ways of running. And so for a civil court judge, if you're interested in running for a civil court judge, the way we do it in Kings County, very different from how we do it in different boroughs. We are, I would say, the only county that has an independent and a really democratic process. We have something called an independent screening panel, where members who are interested go through the panel, and if you come out of it qualified, you'll get the support of the Brooklyn Democratic Party. If you don't, that doesn't stop you from running. You can still run, and some people have won races without the support of or being qualified as the screening panel. So if you're interested in a judge, you know, there's these two routes. And with that, you gotta know the elected officials, you gotta know your community, you gotta know the district leaders who come together, and they're the very lowest grassroots, I guess, position that gets elected outside of county committee. And it is a volunteer job. Yes, you get elected, but it is a volunteer job because you spend a lot of time doing a lot of things in the community, especially running. You even have to raise money to run to be a district leader. And so, you know, and a lot of judges, candidate, there's restrictions. There's things that you can do and things that you cannot do, okay? There's rules, there's ethics rules and things of that nature, so you gotta follow all of that. So that's one aspect. And then you go to the Supreme Court judges. Now, those are the people who gets elevated into Supreme Court. And I guess what's the difference between the Supreme Court and civil? Judge Stern? I think it's $50,000 or more, right, in cases. But it's, you know, you got a lot more cases. It's like a higher, you know, higher cases. And so this is where you come before the district leaders, okay, the non-paid job elected officials. And we come, you go through the screening panel, and then we make a decision on who we want to nominate, and then you go through a big judicial convention where every district across Brooklyn, they run judicial delegates, and then these are the people who actually decide or vote on whether they're going to support the nominees that came out of the district leader role. So it's a whole lot of different things, and it's a different type of strategy because you're not necessarily going out to the communities like you did with the civil court judge position, but you're doing some of that. And you're really connecting with the judicial delegates and the district leaders and so forth. So, you know, that's just a little bit about the process. It varies depending on what position you're running for, and it varies in terms of how much money you're going to spend also. You know, you could raise $1 million for the DA. For civil court judge, you probably would be spending anywhere for $200,000. It depends if you're running in a district or all of Brooklyn. And for Supreme, you don't really spend much. You know, you just go to like functions and so forth. But that's
Great. Great. Well, so I'd love to turn to Judge Swern and Judge Fryer now to kind of talk about being in those processes. And maybe Judge Swern, we can start with you. Thinking about state judicial appointments, are there experiences or qualities that you think are most important for folks to have or to tout, perhaps, in making their way through that complex set of processes?
I'm going to let Judge Fryer talk about elected judgeships because I want to just educate the group because it's about how to do public service and judges. First of all, you can be 5 years out of law school and be a housing court judge. That's an appointment by the mayor and also OCA, the Office of Court Administration. So that's the first level. Well, you could go do arbitrations. You could do small claims court right out of law school, okay? So you can go do that. But assuming you want the job, you can do a housing court job 5 years out of law school. 10 years out of law school, you're eligible to be a judge. Now, I'm going to ask Judge Fryer to talk about her elected process. I'm going to talk about the appointed process. You can be appointed judge in the state, appointed by the mayor or appointed by the governor. If you go for an appointment with the mayor, you can be a criminal court judge or a housing court judge or an interim civil court judge. And so you go to the mayor's committee on the judiciary, you get a subcommittee, then you get into, and these are bar associations and lawyers, you get interviewed by them, they recommend people to the mayor. In past administrations, they would send 3 people up to the mayor, and the mayor would pick 1 out of 3. The current administration, Mayor Adams, they send 1 person up for 1. So the subcommittee recommends to the full committee recommends to the mayor, and then people get selected out of that group to be appointed by the mayor, and then they get sent to the Bar Association just so that the Bar Association can have their input. So that's 2 types of judges, 3 types of judges actually that the mayor can appoint. Then you can go to the governor, and the governor appoints Court of Claims judges. And while you might think that Court of Claims judges only sit in the Court of Claims, that's not true. Court of Claims judges can sit in the Supreme Court, and they can sit other places. Court of Claims are claims against the state. So there is an appointment process that requires similar but different impetuses or initiatives by the person to get that job. And so, for example, and the reason I know about the mayor is because my court attorney, that's another job, you can be a court attorney for a judge, and my court attorney just became an appointed criminal court judge. She's out of law school about 13, 14 years, and she clerked for me. She also clerked for a federal judge, Judge Crotty. She also worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and she worked at a firm. And she wanted to do public service. She wanted to stay at the firm, and that's why she became an appointed criminal court judge. But she's still in the election process, because there are different things you can get as an elected judge as opposed to an appointed judge. Only elected Supreme Court judges can work past the age of 70. Our New York State Constitution limits judges working past the age of 70. Important to me because I'm almost 69 years old. And so that's why getting elected to the Supreme Court is the only group of people that can actually be eligible to work past 70. And so the elected process is important for that. Second of all, the only people eligible to sit on the appellate division are elected Supreme Court judges. So if people want that career trajectory, they have to get themselves elected to Supreme Court. It's very different in the counties. It's very different in terms of the screening committee. I agree with Assembly Person because in Manhattan, for example, which is my most recent recognition, is that in Manhattan, you can get approved by their Democratic screening committee year 1, and year 2, you're not approved. What, you're qualified in 1 year and you're not qualified the next year for the job? But they have a whole different process about getting voted out of committee, and you have to get it 2 successive years in a row. So I always say this because I'm Brooklyn Law School, I live in Brooklyn, work in Brooklyn. A lot of people think Manhattan's the center of the universe, and I don't want to insult anybody who lives in Manhattan and works in Manhattan, went to Manhattan school. But again, their screening committee is always touted as being more democratic. I don't see it being more democratic if you can get voted out of committee 1 year and not next. So that's my Brooklyn pitch.
Great. Maybe you can pick up there, Judge Fryer, about the
Okay, so
elective process.
I think I like the question that you actually gave me in the handouts.
Okay,
I think
go
I'm going
ahead.
to stick to that question. So the question that you had here is, how has my personal story influenced my perspective as a judge? And that's where I want to just let everybody know that despite what naysayers may tell you, if you have a dream that you want to accomplish something, you have to go for it. Because I had naysayers every step of the way, and even in the process of becoming a judge. When I ran for civil court, I had to run against the party. And don't let that frighten you. Mm-hmm. And don't worry about failure, because in order to really be successful, you have to know how to fail once in a while. So go for your dreams, and don't let anybody say that you can't do something that you want to do. And I went to law school with 6 children, and I am so grateful to Brooklyn Law School for making it possible. Helping me get through law school with my kids was really an amazing experience. But I want to talk to you about how my personal story influenced me. So one of the naysayers' predictions that people had said to me was that I'll never get through law school, and that even if I did, I wouldn't have any clients. And then they said, well, even if you did become a successful lawyer, you won't stay committed to your religious background. You'll leave your community. You won't be able to stay within your values as a successful professional. And that's what really bothered me the most, because I didn't want to give up my identity to become a professional. I wanted to be part of my community and raise my children the way I wanted them to be without compromising my values. So I remember the very first week of law school, and I was in the student lounge, and I was saying, oh my God, maybe I pushed too far. Maybe I really will have a hard time. Maybe I won't overcome the challenges, and maybe I won't be able to stay on the path of my community, which is so important to me. And I made my deal with God here, and I said, dear God, help me get through law school without compromising my values, and then when people come to me for help with the law, I will help them. And that was the tremendous impetus to getting involved in public service, because the first woman that came to me for help was someone with a kid at risk. And I started a program for kids at risk. And then the second amazing turn of events was when a group of women asked me to advocate for them because they were EMTs and they wanted to join the community's volunteer ambulance service. And they were foreclosed because the only Jewish ambulance service, which is an amazing service, has a rule that only men can join. They treat men and women, but if you want to volunteer, you have to be a man. And I remember when they approached me, they asked me to come to a meeting, and I thought to myself, what do I know about EMTs? This is not really for me, and I don't really have time for that meeting. But I had my deal with God. I had to go at least to the meeting to see who these women were. And I remember thinking to myself, if these are rabble-rousers, community troublemakers, I'm out of here, because my poor husband, he deals with so much as it is. I got to stay out of trouble. And I went to this meeting, and I met the most incredible, really conservative women who weren't rabble-rousers at all. They were high school principals, and they told me their story of how they had been trained more than 40 years earlier, and there was supposed to be a women's division in the EMS service, but there wasn't. And fast forward, there are women who are having all sorts of emergencies, and they were very vulnerable, and it's time for women to have a choice in EMS in our community. And their cause really spoke to me. But I really thought that would be like my mitzvah of the month, like my good deed of the month. I would help this community. This is the 21st century. I'll fight for them. I'll get them in, and I'm on. I had no idea that I would confront so much opposition, that I would go on and get myself educated in EMS. I became first an EMT and then a paramedic, just to advocate better for these people. And now I can tell you, I've delivered babies in bathtubs. I've helped women with allergic reactions. I've done so much, which has really changed my life. But how does that affect me as a judge? So there's an expression in Yiddish, but I'll just tell it to you in English, that when you do a good deed to help somebody else, you'll find out one day that you actually helped yourself. So I get elected as a civil court judge, and I find out at 2 weeks before my position starts that I'm going to be placed in criminal court. And I thought it was a mistake. I ran for civil court. I know nothing about criminal law, especially growing up and with my background without watching TV or going to the movies. How am I going to sit on criminal court? Oh, don't worry, Judge. You're going to go to judge school, which was 3 days. And we'll teach you. And there I am sitting on the bench thinking to myself, these young kids are coming in front of me for these arraignments. I was doing arraignments. There they are with their handcuffs, and I have to decide their fate. And I get these rap sheets that are big, and they tell me, well, Judge, you have to be quick because there's so many other people that are waiting downstairs. And if you're going to take your time, then they're going to have to wait longer, maybe even stay overnight. So you're not doing anybody a favor by taking your time. And I would think to myself, but this is this person's life. I have to think about this. And I remember initially it was hard for me to make eye contact because I felt so bad for these kids. And then I started to look them in the eye. And you know what I saw? I saw the same pain in their eyes as these young Hasidic kids that I was counseling in my at-risk program. And I realized there's no distinction. They're all the same. They're vulnerable. They went through trauma. And the same way I counseled and spoke to these kids at risk that came to me is the same way I was talking to these young kids that were coming at arraignments. Don't give up on yourself. You can't control who your parents are, but you can control your future. Roll up your sleeves and work hard, and you can change your future. And I had even grown men cry in my courtroom. And then the other side would say, but Your Honor, the prosecutor would say, what about the victim? What about the injuries? We have photos, Judge. I'm sure you don't want to see them. And I would say, I'm a paramedic. I want to see those photos. I want to see those injuries. What exactly happened? What happened? How did it happen? What bone was broken? So there you go. The two projects that I did, my good deed projects, was what helped me my first 2 years on the bench when I was so new, not even thinking I would know how to do an arraignment. But the best experience for being a judge is being a mom. Okay? Because we judge all day when you're a mom. And I remember doing an arraignment once when the prosecutor and defense attorney, they were both women, and they were both arguing. They kept interrupting each other, and one tells the other, stop interrupting me. She can't hear us both at the same time. And I would say, counselors, I raised 6 kids. I can hear you both at the same time. So that's basically, in a nutshell, how my passion for public service and my passion for the law really all blended together, all molded together. And at the end of the day, people who may have been suspect of me, like, why are you doing what you're doing, or why are you straying from the path, have really come to see that it's just a manifestation of my passion for helping people that really helped me get to the bench. So that was a question that I wanted to answer.
Great,
Okay.
great. Well, I'm mindful that we're, running over into our networking time. Maybe a good segue to that portion would be to ask about mentorship. And Judge Reyes, you told such a powerful story about mentoring from Judge Traeger, and now the shoe is on the other foot. You are no longer the mentee, you can be the mentor. So I'm wondering if you have advice about how to find a mentor and how to get the kind of support and advice that you need to build a career in judging and public service.
That's a great question, and I'm not sure I can answer it, how to find a mentor. I sort of fell into Judge Traeger being my mentor, in large part because of Professor Fullerton, who recommended me to him to be his first clerk. And so, at this clerkship, and the natural sort of relationship develops. How to go out and find someone like that other than happenstance. Just keep your eyes open, talk to people, go to Bar Association events, reach out to people that you work with. You can find mentors everywhere, and you don't have to limit yourself to one. You can have many. I find it's natural for me to mentor my law clerks. Some want more mentoring than others, and that's fine. Some don't want any mentoring at all, and that's fine too. But it's special to be able to work with people to help them sort of realize their dreams and what they want. So I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot.
Are there questions from the audience that we can get? Okay, there's one over here. They're bringing mics around.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jose Garcia. I'm with Brooklyn Community Board 5, which represents East New York. And I'm probably the one guy that doesn't belong in the room because, I'm familiar with the, the legal system, but more on the civilian side. So thank you all for your service, first of all, to our city and our people. And my question for you is, there's such a big disconnect between the general public and the legal system, to the point that people feel like the justice system is corrupted or lost. And obviously there's a lot of complicated moving parts. But what's being done for the average person to generally understand the system so that we can work better with the system and not feel like we have to go against it? Because we're seeing a lot of advocates saying the justice system is corrupt, don't be a lawyer, don't go to law school. And that's just wrong, because they don't understand.
Someone want to take that?
You take it first.
All right. I think that, first of all, inviting people to the court and having them sit there. And there are organized groups of court watchers. During COVID, there was a lot of organized groups of court watching. I sat in arraignments in Manhattan. The New York Post sits there every single day writing stories about things that happen. So if you want to combat what the New York Post version of what happened in arraignments, invite people to the courtroom. Okay? And there are a lot, and especially in Manhattan, there are groups of union people and schools and people from foreign countries that come there to watch. I would say that some of the programs that I've developed were really good about that. Drug court, mental health court. We'd go out to talk to stakeholders, the peers. So, when people would ask me to come and talk about drug treatment or mental health treatment in the judicial system, I was knowledgeable because I would do those programs. Now in civil court, I was telling the dean, pro se litigants, people who are not represented by lawyers, need support. And so I'm embarking on a program now where if people come to court and they don't have lawyers, we're going to try to give them not social services, and maybe they don't want to be in court for the reason they think they want to be in court. They come because they need some government help. They don't know what it is. They'll come to court, they'll fill out paperwork, and that's not really what they want. And so if they have social service providers that intersect with them at that point, they can refer them. So I would say that bar associations can do a lot. I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think committees on, because for example, judges can't comment on things. So we can't comment if someone questions our decision or something in the judicial process, but the bar associations can, and they should have rapid response committees comprised of, for example, in criminal cases, a prosecutor, a public defender, a law school professor, people who could answer quickly so that the Bar Association could put out correct information. And I think that would go a long way to trying to enhance public confidence. But I think coming into the courthouse, number one, would be a great way, and it's a public forum. As she said, who said that? Mika said, the first time she was on with a judge in video, there's a lot of video things that we do all day long. People can log on. They don't even need to come down to court. And if they don't even have a computer, there's something called Legal Hand out there that is not even lawyers. It's somebody that you could go to that they could log you on a computer to get involved in something like this. I think libraries. Libraries are a great place for people to get information that they wouldn't otherwise get necessarily at a bar association.
I just wanted to add that I think one thing that would probably increase confidence, public confidence, is getting the public more involved in electing judges. Currently, civil court judges are the only type of judges that can be elected, but criminal, family court, and housing are all appointed. So I do have a bill that changes that, which would make, and of course, I know there's some feedback against it, but it would make housing court judges, because housing is huge, okay, and that's an issue, criminal court judges, as well as family court judges, to be electable as well. So we're not taking away appointments, but we also have another avenue, just like civil. Civil, you can appoint civil, you can run for civil. So housing, we should have that too. And I think that when you have people who are looking to run for judges, they should answer to the public. They should answer to the people, because we are all public service. And I think we can get more engaged when we're involved in the electoral process, which would increase public confidence.
All right, do we have time for one more question?
Hi, I just wanted to clarify about housing court. Housing court is completely different. It's a 5-year term, and you're not appointed by the mayor. There is a process that you go through. It is the Judiciary Committee of the Bar Association, and the housing court has their own advisory council. So you have to go through those 2 steps, and if you get through those 2 steps, then you will meet with the chief administrative judge, and then you're appointed that way.
I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Thank you. Well, that wasn't quite a question, although it was very helpful. Thank you.
There's a
There was
question
one
here.
question
Yes.
over here maybe we can get to.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much for your time. I'm curious what you would advise a recent graduate who may want to pursue judgeship one day, what the type of experience that you would recommend someone get in the law firm setting, right out of law school. My name is Daphne Spector. Thank you for your time and advice.
I think we all could answer that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you're saying if you want to become a judge, what kind of experience do you want to have in a law firm? Is that basically it?
Yes.
So interestingly enough, my background was transactional law. I wasn't even like a court attorney or looking for a judge. I came out of the transactional world, and I find that do what you like. Really go after your passion, because if you like what you do and you find the niche that's good for you, you'll find your way through with all the advice that you got from my co-panelists here about mentorship. But really make sure that you're happy with what you're doing. I mean, if you don't like patent law, then I always loved real estate. That was always my passion. I loved it. And now that I'm doing guardianship, you have no idea how many of my guardianship cases involve properties. And all the attorneys are so surprised that the guardianship judge starts asking them, like, I want to review your contract, show me the title report. We have a lot of violations here, and things that I love doing from my own personal background that help me as a judge now in guardianship. So do what you like and just pursue your dreams. Okay.
I would say, well, first, I guess there's different requirements, I guess, for housing court and for civil, you need 10 years being licensed in the state of New York, so do that, or you can go the housing court route. But there's many different opportunities. You can also do law clerkship. You can be a law court attorney, and every year the Supreme Court judges are looking for like junior clerks. I think you have to have been out of college, out of law school for like a year. So there's an opportunity for that. But just in general, because I had to learn that process with the screening panel, and I didn't even know what qualifies a person to be a judge. But what people look for is exposure and being able to litigate in the courtroom, whatever matter. It could even also be transactional. It doesn't have to be necessarily in the courtroom like a trial judge, a trial court lawyer. Just being able to represent people, whatever matter or whatever issue, being able to write well, maybe some decisions and stuff. I think, usually when you go in front of these bar associations, they like to see a mixture of some of those things. Your writing, who you came before, your temperament, how you're working with the opposing attorney, things like that, and how were you able to represent your clients.
I just reminded myself, I also volunteered in the volunteer attorney program that was, I don't know if it's still around, but maybe in family court. So find opportunities where you as an attorney can volunteer and help the public, and that's basically an entree into public service, and that will also help you network. Mm-hmm. So I volunteered in family court, and I sat in Brooklyn family court, and in Queens I went to a lot. So that would be also a good avenue for you to look into.
And then don't forget there's arbitration opportunities as well. And I think there's something that you can do in night court, in small claim court, that you can talk a little bit about to give you a little bit more, exposure.
Anyone else on that?
If you have aspirations of becoming a federal judge, it's not a prerequisite, but it's a strong recommendation that you have experience in federal court. Especially if you want to be a magistrate judge. There are very few magistrate judges that I know of in the past, southern or eastern districts in the past 30 years that have no experience in federal court. So that's an important thing.
Great.
And if you don't like what you're doing, change your job.
Absolutely.
And I would also advise pro bono opportunities. A lot of law firms support that, and you can practice in areas that are a little bit to the side of the
Great. Well, we definitely had a successful event because now the attendees are talking to each other. So that is a good sign. We want to do more than that. So please join me in thanking our panelists. Please stay and enjoy the reception and continue networking with the panelists and each other. And we'll see you soon at another Women's Leadership Circle event.